Hey guys, welcome back. It's Lucky here, and today we're going to be going over the 1-bar Magicka Templar. I just ran it through Vodastron Hollows, I killed some veteran bosses, I've used it in group content. It feels amazing. It's going to be able to do every piece of this game that you want it to do. It's going to be able to do solo content, it's going to be able to do group dungeons, veteran dungeons, and even veteran trials. This build is capable of hitting 100,000 DPS with 1 bar and one of the simplest rotations that you will ever find in Elder Scrolls Online. I'm going to be playing footage of this build deleting content on the screen while I talk about it and explain how and why it works. A massive shout out to GoAvs for doing a lot of parsing and testing for me to find the optimal skill and gear loadout for this build. If casually hitting 100,000 DPS sounds fun to you, then stick around and let's dive into the 1-bar Magicka Templar. As always, I'm going to cover everything that you need to know to build this build yourself, and I'm also going to put a link to a written guide in the description below. This written guide will have the answer to every question that you have. So if you feel like this video didn't tell you something, maybe a trait or a weight or an enchant on an item, then just check the written guide. The answer is definitely going to be there. And if it's not, feel free to ask in the comments down below or swing by my stream over on Twitch. But first, before we explain how to wipe Bolog Ball's forces from the face of Tamriel, let's talk about how you can delete your enemies in War and Order, the sponsor of today's video. Play as a noble lord and build your city. You and your allies can work together to protect human civilization. While playing, you can not only expand your castles, but also build massive armies to send out into epic animated battles. You can grow your alliance territory and explore unknown lands in order to find elite resources, ancient ruins, and more surprises. You can also train powerful beasts and awaken their battle powers. Then you can send your beasts out with your troops. Speaking of troops, look at the wide variety of troops. Look at them. You can also forge alliances to withstand enemy invasions and join up to go on the offensive, take over the royal city and rule over the realm. And anytime you want to change it up, you can jump into the defense lines and try and see if you can make it to the end. You'll test your brains and your dexterity in this hilarious minigame. Or perhaps you'd prefer to jump into a tower defense against zombies to successfully defend your castle, or die trying. Download the game using the link in the description right now to enjoy $60 worth of free gifts. Good luck out there, and thanks for listening. Let's jump into it. As for the race, the recommended choices right now are going to be the High Elf, the Dark Elf, the Khajiit, and the Breton. The Breton is going to be your go-to choice for better sustain, while the High Elf and the Dark Elf are going to be your go-to choices for damage right now. The Mundus you're going to use is Thief. Thief is going to increase your critical chance. As for your attributes, we're going to put all 64 points into Magicka. The reason we do this is because your character's damage is directly tied to the size of their resource pool. The more Magicka you have, the more damage every one of your spells does. It's in the formula for damage in this game, and so we're absolutely going to take advantage of that. As for the consumables, you're going to go ahead and use Essence of Magicka. Essence of Magicka is going to restore Magicka and increase your Magicka regeneration by 30%. These drop off of mobs in the game, and you can also pick them up at guild traders. They're very cheap and very easy to use, and you should absolutely be spamming these things anytime you're in combat. This is going to greatly improve your sustain. In other words, this is going to make it so you don't run out of magic all the time. As for our food, we're going to go ahead and use Witch Mother's Potent Brew. Witch Mother's Potent Brew is going to give you a little bit of health, a little bit of magicka, while also giving you some magicka recovery. It's great for padding your health, increasing your mag pool, and increasing your sustain all in one. Another great thing about this food is you can use it starting at level 1. There's a lot of food in this game where you can't do that, so this is pretty convenient when making a new character. Now, that's not to say that it's any worse than the foods that you can only use after 160, because it's not. The great thing about this build is it doesn't require any trial gear. It doesn't require high isle. In fact, you could put this build together without having ESO Plus, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to do that. The 5-piece set on the body is going to be Order's Wrath. Order's Wrath is just a fantastic damage set right now. You can craft it in light or medium. We're going to be taking light for the increased sustain on Magicka Tune here, and it's going to give us a ton of crit chance and crit damage. We're going to pair with it Pillar of Nirn. Now, normally I would run Deadly with this, and you certainly can continue to run Deadly on the Templar, but it turns out that the 1-bar Magicka Templar does really well with Pillar of Nirn, because the class only has a handful of damage abilities. Because it's limited to 1 bar, this Pillar of Nirn proc acts as 1 additional damage ability, basically adding almost another 10,000 DPS to your parse. So this is a fantastic set if you have it lying around, or if you're willing to go farm it from Valkyrie Hold. This is a great set. If you don't want to grab Pillar Pillar of Nirn, or maybe you don't have ESO Plus, then feel free to use Deadly. You can pick that up off of Guild Traders. It's going to be a fantastic alternative. For one of the rings, you're going to be wearing the new Oaken Soul ring. This is the new mythic item from High Isle. If you want to utilize this item, you're going to have to go dig it up with Antiquities. I'll put a link to how to get the Oaken Soul ring down in the description below. Very easy to do so. And because we're wearing a mythic item on one of the ring fingers, if you choose to do so, you're going to have to put one of your Pillar of Nirn pieces up here on the shoulder and then wear one piece Slimecraw. Slimecraw we pick because it provides more crit chance than any other one piece item in the game. So it's a nice way to top off a build that loses its monster set bonus because it's using a mythic item. If you don't use Oaken Soul, then just use Ice Heart on the head and shoulder. Again, I have a written guide linked in the description with all of these loadouts written out for you. It's going to be the easiest way for you to follow along and know exactly how to build this. Feel free to look at that while you're listening to the video. And then just before I move on, do note we are using dual wield daggers for this build, but you can use any weapon you want because this build doesn't use any weapon abilities. Literally, you could use daggers, a two-hander, a staff. I mean, you could even use sword and shield. Sword and shield is going to yield less damage for you, but it is a completely viable option if that's something you want to do. Next, on to the most interesting part of this build, perhaps it's going to be our abilities. First up, we're going to take Blazing Spear. Blazing Spear is just, it's a really hard-hitting AoE dot for the class. It's great in group content because your group members can grab it to get tons of synergies back, and it hits a huge area. This skill, don't underestimate the Blazing Spear AoE damage. It puts out an incredible amount of damage, and it puts out a good chunk of that damage right when it hits the ground. So you can use this as a spammable if there's more than like 4 enemies in front of you, 4 or more enemies or so, then you could use this as a spammable. Unless you're soloing, you're going to want to keep using your jabs probably to get that life leech coming in. But let's say you have a bunch of enemies on your tank or something. Blazing Spear is your spammable. This is your AoE spammable. Just keep using this ability over and over until there's only a few mobs left, and then switch to Puncturing Sweeps. Which brings us to the next ability, Puncturing Sweeps. Puncturing Sweeps is one of the most, if not the most, useful spammables in the entire game. This ability not only does an incredible amount of damage, but it's also going to slow the enemy by 40% and heal you for 41% of the damage done with the ability. Yeah, 41% of the damage you do comes back to you, which is why Oaken Soul works so well as a solo build item, whereas other classes are oftentimes going to have to stay with the Ring of the Pale Order while soloing because they need that life leech coming back in while they're parsing away on a boss. They can get by without the Pale Order, but it just makes it so much easier with it. But the Magicka Templar has sweeps, so they're all right. They get to use sweeps and Oaken Soul and feel amazing. Next, we have Radiant Glory. Radiant Glory, we're not going to use until the boss gets down to around 21% health. This is the execute for the ability. It does a ton of damage, but only when the boss is really low on health. If you use this when the boss is on full health, well, it's not going to do very much damage. It's going to be a DPS loss for you. But if you wait until it gets low, it's a fantastic finisher. You can start using it around 21%, and great news is it's also going to return 20% of the damage you inflict back to you. So this is something that keeps you alive and does damage yet again. The fourth ability is Harness Magicka, but you could also use Channeled Focus if you would like. Channeled Focus is going to give you Major Resolve. It's also going to give you Magicka Recovery. Although I found that this build had ridiculous amounts of sustain. Like I never got low. I never even got close to being low while I was running this through veteran content and veteran solo arenas. My sustain was absolutely insane. So I would probably opt for Harness Magicka if I was soloing. And then if I'm in a group, I'm going to take something like Solar Barrage or Power of the Light for the extra damage. Again, I'll be sure to note all of that in the written guide. Next, we have Barb Trap. Barb Trap is going to be doing a few things for us. One, it's just an incredible dot nowadays. It scales off of mag or stam, which means mag tunes are now using it because, man, that is a ton of damage that it's putting out. And it's giving us minor force. It's buffing us while putting out a ton of damage. It's really hard to turn this one down. And not just that, Fighter's Guild has some of the best passives in the entire game. So having a Fighter's Guild ability on your bar allows that bar to do more damage. It's getting more weapon damage. It's getting more ult regen, right? Really powerful buffs coming to your build just for having a Fighter's Guild ability slotted. We call these bar buffers. So this is a great bar buffer as well as a great dot. Then one more Fighter's Guild ability, Flawless Dawnbreaker. Flawless Dawnbreaker does good damage damage. It's a nice big burst damage ability. And then after you activate it, you get a burst window for 20 seconds. Your spell damage is going to be increased by 300. So you are going to be doing a lot more damage for 20 seconds after you pop this ability. And again, it's a fighter's guild ability. So it's also once more buffing your bar. It's giving you more spell damage for having this ability slotted. Now, one of the best parts about this build is how simple the rotation is, how easy it is going to be for the average player to put out massive amounts of DPS. Because if you look at this bar, there's not that many abilities that you're having to juggle. There's not a lot of dots that you're having to maintain, and there's no bar swapping going on. So basically, you're going to start the fight with your blazing spear and your barb trap. Then you just jab. You're going to puncturing sweep until one of those things falls off. And then when it does fall off, you replace the blazing spear and you go back to sweeping. And then when the barb trap falls off, you replace the barb trap. You can ult anytime it's up. You're going to get it back really fast. This is one of the cheapest ults in the game at 119 ult cost. And because of your fighter's skilled ability slotted, you're going to be getting ult back like a maniac, and as well as some class passives that help with ult regen. Then once the boss hits 21%, you're going to use Radiant Glory instead of sweeps, and you're going to maintain your barb trap, but you're going to stop worrying about blazing spear. So it's just going to be Radiant Glory and barb trap in the execute phase, as well as your ult anytime it's available. And that's it. Super simple rotation, sweeps all day long, and then just replace blazing spear or barb trap anytime they fall off. Now let's really quickly go over the passives that make the Templar tick. If you're new to the Templar, or if you've never read these passives before, this is going to be really good information for you as a player. It's only going to take a couple minutes, so try to stick through it. The first passive is Piercing Spear. With an Adric Spear ability slotted, it increases our critical damage by 10% and increases our damage done to blocking targets by 10%. The important bit there is the first one, where we're increasing our crit damage by 10%. Crit damage buffs are huge in this game, so you always want to make sure you have one of these abilities on both bars. If it's a 2-bar build, this is a 1-bar build. We've got it on the front bar, our only bar, so we've got that buff. We're good to go. Next, we've got Spear Ball. When activating an Adric Spear ability, gain minor protection for 6 seconds, reducing our damage taken by 5%. That is huge. 5% damage reduction, just a flat 5% damage reduction, is massive for keeping ourselves alive. So this is, again, really nice to have, and it activates anytime we're using one of these abilities. Well, our execute is one of these abilities, our spammable is one of these abilities, so we're pretty much always going to have minor protection on this character. Next, we have Burning Light. Whenever you deal damage with an Adric ability 4 times in rapid succession, you deal 6,500 magic damage to your target. This is a nice little explosion of damage that hits them anytime you're using your abilities, and since we're using a spammable from this line, you're going to be constantly setting off Burning Light. You're going to constantly be getting that 6,500 damage burst. Next, we have Balanced Warrior. Increases your weapon and spell damage by 6% and your spell resistance by 1320. So this is just a flat buff to your character. You don't need to know anything or do anything specific to activate it. It's great. It's just there. It's always there, which is nice. Next, we have the Dawn's Wrath passives. Enduring Rays is going to increase the duration of some of the abilities in this line. So make sure that you grab this passive if you are going to be running Solar Barrage or Power of the Light. Next, we have Prism. Casting a Dawn's Wrath ability while in combat generates 3 ultimates. So the nice thing about Prism is if you want to do more damage in fights where you have a healer, you won't need Harness Magicka. So you can drop Harness Magicka and you put Power of the Light, which means, most of the times when you're using Power of the Light, you're going to be proccing this extra ult gen. It can occur every 6 seconds. Power of the Light is a 6-second dot. Boom. So every time you use Power of the Light, you're going to get extra ult regen. You're going to get your ult faster. Really, really nice synergy there. Illuminate. Casting a Dawn's Wrath ability grants minor sorcery to you in a group for 20 seconds. Another great reason to be using Power of the Light or Solar Barrage right here is that you're going to get that 10% extra spell damage from Illuminate passive, right? So anytime you're in a group, you can drop Harness Magicka. Your healer's going to be keeping you alive. Your sweeps are going to be keeping you alive, right? So you can focus on doing damage. Next, we have Restoring Spirit. And also, this buff, Illuminate, is for your whole group. So everybody in the group gets 10% extra damage. It's great. Next, we have Restoring Spirit. Reduces the health, mag, and stam, and ultimate cost of your abilities by 5%. So this is just another always on buff passive that you get it and forget it, but it's nice to know that it's there. From the Restoring Light line, we're going to be grabbing Sacred Ground just in case you do use the rune. It's going to make it so that you heal better whenever you've stood in that rune recently. We've got Light Weaver whenever you heal an ally. And then we're also going to grab Master Ritualist, which increases your resurrection speed by 20%. This is why Templars are the best rezzers in the game. They get a free 20% increase res speed. that nobody else gets. We all have to go to champion points to get a res speed increase, while the Templars get that built in, and they can double dip by grabbing the CP node as well. Not only that, but the resurrected allies will return with 100% more health, and it'll give you a 50% chance to fill an empty soul gem after each successful resurrection. That last bit's not really important. You're gonna have more soul gems than you need, but hey, it's something. As for the weapon passives, we're gonna grab the dual wield passives because we are gonna be using dual wield. If you want to use a staff, you absolutely can. Then just make sure you grab the destruction staff passives, right? Or whichever weapon you want to use. If you want to use two-hand, you can just grab all the two-hand passives. Like I said, this build actually works great with every single weapon because we're not using a weapon ability. It really doesn't matter which weapon we take. It just matters that you grab all the passives for that weapon. The dual wield is going to provide the most damage though, if that's what you're looking for. As for the armor passives, we're going to grab all of the light armor passives and all of the medium armor passives because we are going to be wearing 1 piece of medium and 6 pieces of light. Next, we're going to grab the first 4 passives in the Fighter's Guild because we're going to be using 2 Fighter's Guild abilities. The first passive is going to reduce the costs of these abilities by 15%, so that's great for our sustain. The second one is one of the most important ones. Increase your weapon and spell damage by 3% for each Fighter's Guild ability slotted. So we have 2 Fighter's Guild abilities slotted. Remember what I said about these being bar buffers? So now every ability on this bar is getting 6% damage added to its spell damage. So it's a 6% spell damage increase to all of these abilities. Really huge for their damage and for their output. And then next, the other really important passive from this line, Banish the Wicked. With a Fighter's Guild ability slotted, you generate 3 ultimate whenever you kill any enemy. So anytime you kill an enemy, boom, you get 3 ultimate. That's huge for your ult regen. That's why it's really rare to see a build put together with 0 Fighter's Guild abilities on it, right? Because 1, it's a great bar buffer. 2, it's great for your ult regen. And then finally, Skill Tracker. This is just going to make your Fighter's Guild abilities do 10% more damage. Hey, nice. As for the champion points, if you're looking for the champion points, then definitely look at the champion points listed in the written guide. It's going to be a lot easier for you to read that than for me to read them off to you here. So check out the written guide for champion point loadouts and any extra details that you might have missed on this build. How to get the Oaken Soul will be linked in the description below, as well as the written guide for this build. So check those out. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Leave a comment down in the description below. A massive thank you to the YouTube members for making these build guides possible. Thank you so much for helping me be able to make content about things I like, as opposed to just content that's going to get the most views. Another great way to support this channel is to like this video. Liking the video lets Algorithm Senpai know that, hey, this content is worth showing to more people. And feel free to sub for more MMO content. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a fantastic day, night, or evening, wherever you might be, and I'll see you in the next video.